Welcome everybody. We got ourselves a little treat today. Gunnar has asked me, the real gun daddy, Gunnar extraordinaire, for Zoomers Gunnar, as you may know him, has asked me to do a replay analysis for him. So we're going to be checking out some mid Pugna and going to be hoping to learn some stuff ourselves. Obviously, since Gunnar's a very high MMR player, at least he was until he dropped like 2,000 MMR. No, I'm kidding, dude. He has been telling me he's been struggling a little bit, but that's okay. Let's check it out.
Banana slam jam.
No flame here. Complete and utter love for my boy Gunnar. Standard mid items. A lot of times I'll also be talking to you guys about things he's doing right, not only things I think he's doing wrong. So I know Gunnar loves to contest the bounty runes like this. He prioritizes it a lot of the time. I don't actually have a decision on whether or not this is good. I know against a hero like SF, I might prioritize blocking, but he clearly doesn't, so let's see what happens here. Defensive creep aggro, messing with the CS. We call those pseudo denies. I like the casual right clicks he's getting in there. A lot of harass. I would have to imagine Pugna's not an amazing matchup for us against SF. Not knowing the damage on your nukes, not ideal. Crap up. Lane management seems pretty decent. Always making sure he's nuking the range creep. So far, obviously, haven't found too many major problems. Using his nuke to get the CS like that, that's interesting. I feel like there's something wrong there that you're having to nuke that creep. So you're choosing to nuke it in order to get here faster? Interesting. I guess that makes sense. You're costing yourself mana, but you're making it so you can probably make it back to this creep in time. My question for you as a mid laner is that you're against SF, a hero that rapidly clears the wave. So I would think of this range creep as like a liability. That's how I usually think of range creeps. So the lane's underneath the tower, and your nuke does plenty of damage, right? You're level 3. So it's going to be 175 damage. This creep doesn't even technically have to be half health, and SF can't one-shot it before you can hit it. So the way I look at this range creep is you're putting yourself in like an unnecessary liability situation, because you're like trying to right-click it down while he's underneath his tower. If he's a hero that like didn't threaten you, I think this would be good. But since SF can nuke you a bunch, I don't really understand why you would put yourself in this spot here. Like, even though he missed his second raise, he then pushes you away because he threatens you. And then you end up getting the creep denied when I don't really think with your nuke that should ever happen. So just kind of a peculiar decision from my perspective there. Let's see. Okay. That's a nuke that you definitely should not be hitting the range creep with. Like, you should purposely be not hitting the other range creep. It should be targeted to be like right here. It's another situation I think you're putting yourself in, where this is like creating this liability for you. It makes the lane feel really awkward. I'm sure you know this, like this specific instance. I'm not really sure, but for people, like, this is what you want to avoid, right? Because now he feels like his positioning in lane is catered towards this creep. Meaning if he were to walk here, then the SF would just right-click this creep twice. So what that basically does is it forces him to be within range of this creep in amount of time that this SF could cook it twice. So he has to be like right here, right? And then he's going to get nuked with SF raises and such because of that. And he ends up using another nuke to get that range creep killed, but I would argue that just doesn't need to be done. I think you took like an extra raise for that, and maybe had to use an extra nuke than you should have. Either way. I feel like when I watch really good laners, they're the ones that are like never uncomfortable. Like, it doesn't look like whenever I play against Sumail, for instance, I feel like he's always dictating my movements in lane. It feels like whatever's happening with the creep wave, he can always predict what I'm going to do, and I can never really forcibly predict whatever he can do. So I've already noticed like 2 or 3 times this lane where you've put yourself kind of willingly put yourself in situations that the other guy manipulates your positioning rather than the other way around. Okay. That was a nice fort by him there, and it kind of fucked you over. Yeah. So that's a really good example of something where you want to leave the lane. Notice how he set up all these creeps to be dying to the same nuke. It makes it so this SF is threatened by the nuke that he's about to use. So the SF actually has to back off because of... He's like setting up himself to use the nuke. So notice how the SF then backs off, which is a very nice way to effectively push the lane with minimal resistance. You're basically telling the guy you're going to nuke, but that's fine in this case because your goal is to go get the bounty rune. So that was a good one, kind of teaching other people with that one. I was surprised you were willing to stay in lane like that with Earthshaker showing. I feel like if Earthshaker TP's mid, I would want to be passive if I don't see where SF is. It seemed like an unnecessary risk for you to be taking. It's like even if you live, you're taking like more damage than you're going to be dishing out. I guess maybe your thought is to have the SF prove that he's there, but I feel like the SF is going to be there, and making him like prove it isn't really worth it. So I'm going to pause for a second and say, guys, I know Gunnnar is absolutely nuts. Like, I see him, he's the kind of guy that I don't always know what he's doing, and I'll just randomly see him dive into the opponent triangle. And, like, half the time it owns, and the other half it sucks. It's hard for me in games, or even now as a replay analyst, to, like, say, dude, like, what are you fucking doing, right? But what I'm seeing is that this Earthshaker TP's mid, and your play isn't going to work on SF if Earthshaker is here. Like, that's kind of the condition for whether or not this play you're about to make works. And Earthshaker was here, and he just hasn't proven he's anywhere else. Like, where would he be right now? He could be bottom, he could be top. And I feel like this type of aggression from you, it shouldn't be a bluff. It should be calculated whether or not it's good. It's like, if Earthshaker's missing, it's not good. If Earthshaker shows underneath a ward somewhere, this is a great play. But you pay the price because you just kind of didn't give the Earthshaker credit, and he cancels it instantly, and here you are feeding. And I know you force out a Spectre Haunt, but that's like, the Spectre's perfectly happy to kill you here. That's like, you're like the momentum for your team with tower pushing and everything. So, okay, suddenly we have a huge fight going on mid. I don't really know why the rest of your team's feeding here, but I think that was entirely avoidable by you happening there. So that's the type of aggression that I know you love doing, and that's an example where they just fought you, they have no resources, and so you know they can't fight back, they have no haunt. Not only the fact that Earthshaker could be there, but the fact that they have a carry that can rotate also makes your play even worse. And in this case, like, obviously global haunt. So now you're going to go pressure the hero that doesn't want to be fighting. This is a very good example of a rotation. You get the opportunistic rune, you know you're stronger than them, and also you know the hero doesn't have their ult, so the enemy team doesn't want to play around them, and they also don't want to be playing... That hero doesn't want to be fighting. So this is an example of the Spectre potentially being really bad, like it's a bad play by Spectre, because she goes to the lane that the opponent will naturally rotate to against a hero that naturally kills her, the Mars, and it makes it a very natural rotation for the opponent mid. Any player of Gunnar's caliber, I would 100% expect to punish this every single time. So that's something to learn from the Spectre's perspective, and it's also just a good play by Gunnnar. So, okay, let's go ahead and fast forward it here. Notice how he goes bottom, and he's always paying attention to mid lane. He's always worried about his mid lane tower going down whenever he rotates. You being full health there with no Nyx or no Haunt makes that like a reasonable decision. It's a bit different when you're like aggressively in their river than it is to be near your tower, forcing the Earthshaker to fissure you. These are definitely different. So it's like, what I see from Gunnar is he takes every opportunity to be aggressive that he can. But then sometimes it's just a bit much. In this case, we do see him giving up the mid wave as a way to help secure the bounty. So this is an example where the mid wave isn't always the most important thing. There's bounty runes and other objectives to be taken on the map. I personally don't understand what you're doing here, right? So this play right here makes sense to me. This is the Gunnar. This is where me and Gunnar don't see eye to eye. And he's obviously going to continue doing what he's doing if he thinks it's right. So this makes sense to me. You want to contest an objective. There's this bounty rune that needs to be taken, and the opponent's fighting for it. You're helping your Monkey King secure the bounty. This, up until this point, makes complete sense to me. And now I see a lane bottom that's getting pushed, which is going to have to be reacted to. I see a lane mid that could be pushed, and I see a top lane that could be defended. That's like what I see on the map right now. I see 3 objectives that could be potential. 2 defensive, one offensive. And I don't see how anything over here does any of it. Like, I don't see what any engagement over here does. I personally just don't see it. I don't see why this matters. I feel like every time you're on my team and you do this stuff, it makes me feel super awkward. Like, as an offlaner, I feel awkward to rotate to you now. And what you've told me in the past, which is something important, is that if my positioning on the map's awkward and it ruins your positioning to come here, don't do it. And I would agree that Mars's rotation here is bad. Like, he shouldn't come help you. But then at the same time, why are you even here in the first place? There's just no objective. There's no gain here. And it's also near a tier 1 where they can counterplay you. So you told me before you gave me this replay that you fed. And I think, like, against these heroes, you know, you'd look and say, maybe he got ganked a lot by Earthshaker. Maybe he, like, got ganged up on. Maybe all that kind of stuff. I feel like you just walked into their side of the map without the right amount of information or no objective in sight. And suddenly, both of your feeds have resulted in some real awkward Dota here. I think last feed resulted in 2 other deaths from your team, and so did this one. So it's very unnecessary. Let me rewind a bit here. So this is when the part of the game gets really tough for you. I think these early deaths start snowballing when you have a hero like Pugna and you're against Nyx Earthshaker, right? It's going to start snowballing against you because these heroes do kill you, especially with the Nyx 6 and the Carapace into stun here. I don't hate this death nearly as much as I hate the other ones, but those are the type of spots where, as a player, everyone watching to learn here, that catapult is what kills you. It's always the last creep. It's always like, I'm going to stick around for that last creep. And I think it's much more important that you push the mid lane than it is to get all the CS, right? So for him, he just made it a little way too greedy there. He's like, okay, if I stick around for this last creep, I can get this catapult. But the enemy team was all just top. So the amount of time that you have to push that creep wave is however long it takes Nyx to travel from top to mid. That's how long you have. Because you do have to assume he's level 6 at this point. You do have to assume he's invisible, and that if he was going to kill somebody, it could be you, right? It could be. It's not saying that he's 100% mid. But you stuck around for that extra 3 or 4 seconds for that catapult, and that gave the Nyx ample enough time to rotate onto you. What I see the best players doing, you know, I understand Gunnnar is very good. When I'm saying best players, I'm talking like top 5 players. Is every time I'm playing like 4 position and I try to gank them, they're almost always 1 step ahead of me. They always cut off that last 3 seconds that they're on the creep wave. They know exactly how long it takes me to get from top to mid, and then they leave by the time I get there. I feel like I'm chasing after them rather than conveniently getting on top of them at the right time. But okay. It's a little bit awkward now. We're against a bunch of heroes that kill us. We've fed a bunch. Don't want to be on our own. I would argue that you just go with your team and hope for the best. But you're actually going to walk towards mid. Defend your own tower. Okay. Mid tower or bottom tower did get taken. Guess you deemed that you were not necessary to defend or to take that. And like this to me again is like crazy. This is ludicrous. I guess since your Mars is here, it's fine, and your Oracle's also behind you. Nice pump fake on the nuke there. Got the Nyx to Carapace. With your Oracle behind you, makes a lot of sense that you want to be aggressive. This is good. This is a lot of pressure he's creating in the mid lane, forcing a lot of heroes around him, but since he's got the Oracle, he should be just fine. This is the kind of stuff you do that I like a lot. It seems like needless aggression, but you're forcing so many enemy heroes here. It's allowing your Mars to farm top, your Techies to farm out bottom, your Monkey King to farm the jungle. This is very good stuff. And as an Oracle player, it's good that they sit behind you, knowing that he's the reason you're allowed to play like this. As a support, if you can make a core on your team play much more aggressively, either because you help them kill somebody, or because you help them not die, in this case, the not die one, it's a great place for you to be. So something to learn for the support role there. Notice how they all left the mid lane eventually, and your consistent pressure on this tower has forced them back over and over again. So notice how he's elected, since he's kind of squishy, to play around the guy that defends him, and to just constantly pressure the same part of the map because he doesn't feel confident enough to walk out onto the opponent's side of the map. This is good. I like this a lot. This is very good. Honestly, it's like... I would argue that death's okay. Because that death was a result of doing consistent aggression for like 3 minutes in a row. I don't really harp on those type of deaths. I think it could be avoided. I think it's something that you can really iron out. But I would argue I would probably die there too. They're going to go back to mid. They used SF ulti. We forced out some abilities. If we force them to use abilities to kill us the first time, there's no reason to stop what we're doing. So that's like a message to other people. I like this. Continued aggression. Oh, but they have Earthshaker. Okay, okay, okay. You should be okay here, I think. Actually, no. You're going to die. Okay. So that was like another surprise to you that you got caught off guard by the Echo Slam. Let me rewind a bit, because that's an interesting fight. This one I thought might actually go well for you. I think it's just positioning from you and the rest of your team to get 3-man echoed right here. I don't actually hate this play. I honestly don't hate it. Mid lane's kind of pushed, top lane's whatever, bottom lane's pushed in. You had a Techies, you're rotating to them. I think at this point it's just the fact that they have a carry that can be active and you don't. I guess you don't have a neutral item yet. Okay, back to mid lane you go. I would like to point out to you guys that when you take bottom tier 1, I'm going to let this play out so we don't have to hear these sounds in the back. That, oh my god, can somebody stop channeling shit? This is insane. I just want to pause. Silence. I want to point out to everyone watching that this game is really awkward, right? He's in a really weird scenario. They're losing. They're against Spectre Earthshaker, like a pretty greedy lineup with long cooldown ultimates. And he's identified that he can't really leave his side of the map that well. He did go bottom jungle. It didn't work out so hot. And he's identified the objective on the map for him to take as a hero that pushes. If he was like a split pusher, his goal would be to farm the part of the map that the opponent needs to deal with and doesn't want to deal with. As a hero like Pugna, it's his job to put as much pressure on towers as possible, even in bad situations. So what he's done is tunnel visioned on the mid lane. That is what he's done. He's like, I am going to push this mid lane. I am going to play around this mid lane. And I think that's a really important aspect of Dota that a lot of low MMR players don't understand. And I like this relentless aggression on the mid lane. You keep forcing them to use a ton of spells to defend their mid tower, and eventually they're going to run out. And I think that's really good. The exact decisions that you've made around here, maybe they weren't the best, you know, walking into their jungle, but that might have just been, I think that was more of just a positioning thing from the rest of your team. And the relentless aggression on the same objective that is an objective that matters to you has been very good. I like this a lot. So, okay. These are the type of plays that need to be made if you are behind on a hero that is a tempo setter. Okay. There, it worked out. Okay, so you died again, though. But we did get the mid tower. I don't think there's really any clear objective for us to get right now. So we're kind of just in get some survivability items, don't feed mode. They have all their ultimates. We need to chill a bit. So these are all things I would be thinking right now. So we see 2 heroes top. We feel confident enough to go push mid a little bit. Playing super defensive. The one guy that's alone still doesn't die to you. Kind of sucks, but... So my issue here about this entire thing is that the reason why you guys are going on this timber and that it's like supposedly okay to go on this timber is because they kept showing heroes top. So it's like, I don't know why you're continuing to mess with him when he runs towards his team like this. Like, the reason why I would have messed with him in the first place is because mid lane's the objective. Like, mid lane is what matters here, right? And you guys were having this back and forth engagement, and then you started being more aggressive because you saw heroes top. And I think that's really good, right? You're supposed to do that. You see more heroes top, you know the Timbersaw doesn't have help, and you can more aggressively push this wave. And then suddenly you start being more aggressive on this guy, and he starts running towards his team, which is the reason why you're not here in the first place. Like, or the reason why you're confident to be aggressive on this Timbersaw in the first place. But what now happens is the objective you were originally focusing on is, like, completely dropped from your head. And instead of, like, I would be thinking to myself, this Timbersaw has to be near his team, right? He's now running towards his team. I'm doing this to bully him away from mid lane. And the second he gets closer to his team like this, we have to have the discipline to just drop the push, or drop the aggression. Just drop it. Because we have techies farming bottom. We're not going to save our Monkey King. And the reason why we were initially pressuring the Timbersaw in the first place was to push this mid wave. And what makes me upset is that this just stops mattering. Whatever the fuck this is just doesn't matter anymore. Even if we killed this Timbersaw, what matters is this mid wave gets pushed. That's what matters, right? Suddenly, your tower is available to be taken. And they're just diving you underneath it at 21 minutes into the game. I feel like what happens is, if we kill this mid wave after this Timber runs to the high ground, we can then decide whether or not we want to fight them. We can then decide, okay, now that we've got all of our lanes, we got mid lane pushed out, what can we do with this? Bottom lane's pressured, mid lane's pushed in. I would argue that your techies would probably be hitting this tower if this wasn't happening, right? Where he feels the need to cut this wave or set up around mid. But because this is happening, he definitely needs to come migrate over here. And instead, we're just like losing this tower, we're like losing this lane. And I think what I'm seeing is your aggression, when I can like imagine what the objective is like really good. It's like even when you weren't directly taking an objective, the times where you were mid with Oracle behind you, you were like consistently threatening an objective. And I don't particularly mind that you died to that SF ulti at like, 12, 15 minutes in or whatever. Because you were consistently threatening the same objective. You were creating so much space on the map. And in this case, the objective just ceases to matter. And that's when the aggression, to me, it's like, I can't identify why you would chase that Timber, right? Like, there's just, other than killing the Timber, I can't identify why you would do it. And usually, to me, that results in bad things. Okay. So notice, guys, how often he just goes mid and pushes it. If that doesn't speak to you enough, coming from like a 9k plus MMR player, Gunnnar here. So they're all missing. I'm surprised how confident you are. I guess it's the techies' minds. Maybe makes you feel a bit better. Maybe it's the fact that their Spectre Haunts off on cooldown. We see 3 heroes mid now. Top lane's free for us to push a wave or two, which is what you're going to do. You see them walking towards you. You know you got to get out of here. And you're going to farm that camp. Okay. So it looks like you were trying to bait for your team a little bit here. You were confident that you guys could take a fight. I don't hate that idea. Makes sense. You were like you were looking to get a fight there, just clear. It didn't work out, but I don't hate this as nearly as much as I've hated a lot of the other things. It's interesting to me that you would want to fight there. Let's kind of check items here. Oh, this guy has his BKB. Okay. Everyone has their items. Okay. Like, that's a reasonable fight to me. You know what? You want to force... You know they're going to run at you. You have the ward vision. I'm fine with that. I don't hate that fight at all. At the highest level, guys, even if you play really well, you're not going to win every fight. That's just how it is. So as long as I can come up with a reason why his fight would make sense, I don't care. As long as... Even if they lose. I mean, we can rewind that. It's like... It's like, what do we see on the map, right? I think that's just kind of like greedy. We just don't see anyone. And they haven't gone bottom for a really long time. It seems like a game since you have techies playing bottom. I think you're not really adjusting to the fact that you have a techies. The fact that you have a techies, if you envision it from like the opponent's perspective, they're just never going to go bottom, right? Like, why would they ever go bottom? They know your techies is bottom, and they know if they go there, they could just blow up. So... The fact that they don't want to play bottom, it just makes it like infinitely more likely that they're top. So in this case, it's like I would feel safe maybe to go for bottom rune because they're going to be hesitant to go there at all. But top rune is, it's almost certain that one of their carries, if not more than one, will be farming the triangle. And then another one's going to be pushing mid. So if you're going to top lane, you're like going to pretty often run into 2 heroes at least, 2 of which are cores. And then if there's one support there, which we only saw the Nyx, it might have been a replay bug. Maybe you didn't see him. So it's like, for me, it's a lot about envisioning where the opponent would want to play here. And it just makes top rune a very likely to be dangerous place. And this death was really bad, right? Because it gave them a Roche. So they're going to dive like fucking crazy. Okay, Spectre was being a little nice to us here. I feel like at this point in the game, if you just had a BKB, you would be able to play Dota in these fights. And that's virtue of just these deaths. I think you should have more items. Like, it's not like you're going the wrong items. I think the Glimmer makes sense to me. Maybe the Force Staff's a bit much, but you wouldn't have even had the BKB yet. But yeah, my main argument is the fact that you just don't have enough money, and that's because, obviously, of what's gone wrong in the game. So that death, I'd say, was pretty unavoidable. You took a fight in your base, you punished them, but, you know. Obviously, you recognize you need a BKB as well. Okay. I need to know, man. I just need to know. Why? Okay, what? Okay, first off, why the fuck is this replay bug happening? So what I've noticed, it actually happens with you a decent amount, I'll be honest, Gunnar, is there's such a difference between knowing to farm the wave in order to get the farm, or knowing to farm the wave in order to push it. So it's like, obviously farming the wave to farm is way greedier. It's like the option where you're like, I feel safe enough to get all of this gold. I feel like this mid wave, from what I understand from high level players, is that this mid wave is the most important objective in the game that isn't a tower or Roche. It like decides so much about map movements. It gives so much information, and by you like walking up with the entire enemy team missing and only like Mars behind you, And just farming the wave like that implies to me that you don't value that as an objective. Like, you're saying it just doesn't matter because you're assuming the opponent team's not going to play around it. I feel like in high MMR games, which this one very much is, like SF's YawaR, Moon Meander's the Earthshaker, you should expect that the opponent knows this too, right? They're gonna play around this as an objective. It's a very important objective. I would say Monkeys makes the same mistake a lot. As much as I love Monkeys, I was jokingly flaming him on the cast because I think he does this too. There is one example as Bloodseeker he had, I could find the game, where he was right here, and he could have just nuked out mid-wave, and instead he walked up to it to hit it, and then died to a smoke gank, like 5 seconds later. He actually walked into like 4 heroes that were smoked. And it's like the mid-wave is such an important objective that a lot of times you have to treat it like, if everyone's missing, I can't farm it. And it's like, so at that point you have to decide, can I even walk up to it at all and nuke it? Or do I have to just back off? And I've now seen like at least 2 deaths, I think, where you were just farming it when you could have just nuked it. And in this situation, when they're all missing, by pushing the wave, you're going to find out where they are. Like, you're going to do that, right? So let me fast forward here. Like right here, we see 1 bottom and we see 1 top, and that's it. And it's like, okay, I see how you could be a bit safe now. Like, you feel a bit safe. But why not just nuke this? Why not just nuke it? Even going for the range creep. Dude, I would say you're just straight disrespecting them. If you think you can get like 1 or 2 melee creeps, okay. But man, walking up to that range creep, man, that's just straight disrespect. That is straight up disrespect. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like if everyone's watching, every feed you've had, like random feeds, have resulted in some drastic losses for your team. Drastic losses. I guess you intentionally gave me a game that you don't think you played all that well. Back to mid lane we go. It's like, I think you're correct to be playing around mid. But we're doing it to push the wave. And if we're having a rough game, then sometimes we just don't get that farm. Everything you did here is reasonable. Pushed out bottom, showed up to the fight. Okay. You were playing pretty safe bottom. All this is reasonable. All this is fine. Good or bad, it's going to be fine. Chasing after the Timber Saw, but you go back to push mid. Okay. Unfortunate. Looks like your team extended a little bit too far. Everything I'm seeing here is pretty reasonable, though. Okay. Worked out. Spectre actually died for it. Cool. Buyback costed, but it's fine. Positioning in fights is overall pretty good. I've never had an issue with how you fight. You're a very mechanically strong fighter. Yeah, it's just the story of your life, man. You should have a BKB by now. When you don't have BKB, you're going to die to SF from, like, you know, ridiculous range. So there's not much you can do about it. I think your positioning in that fight was pretty good. Just need a BKB. I just want to rehash again, guys, how often you see Gunnnar putting himself in the mid lane to push it. It's pretty much all the time. And the cool thing about watching a 9k MMR player is you can tell what objectives mean a lot to them. And I think there's actually so much to learn in a game like this because he's against really good players too. And I would argue that like the 5 or 6 times he's had feeds, like just straight up feeds, not deaths, but feeds, have been when he's straight away from any objective. Like there's just no objective anymore and he just feeds. Or he is pushing the mid lane like it is his objective, and he does it too aggressively, or he does it in a way that's not safe enough, right? And those are the times where he's dying. And this is the really cool part that I talked to you guys about learning how to push waves. And someone like Gunnnar can teach you so much. And like learning how to play around objectives. I think overall his positioning on the map has been good. His execution of it's the problem. And that's where at the highest level, you know, you expect players like him to always be at the right part of the map. And if you watch this, you can see how much he emphasizes the right part of the map. He's always going to be towards mid. And his like rotation top earlier, that was absolutely fine too. It's like all of his rotations, I can't really argue against any of them. It's like the way he's executing what he's doing, though, the discipline to be sticking to his guns. You know, like he was pushing mid, he's bullying Timbersaw away from mid. Timbersaw runs towards his team, so instead of pushing mid, he chases the Timbersaw and feeds. Like, that's like a perfect example of losing vision of the objective you are playing around. I know Gunnnar is a very feels player. I know he goes a lot on instinct. And I can tell that his instinct about where to play the map is very good. But I feel like, to some extent, instinct matters a lot, but you still have to have that conscious thought that I am here to do X. And if I'm here to do that, either stick to doing that, or while I'm doing it, worry about what's going to stop me. And I think your awareness on that front has definitely been off this game. And I'd say, out of the high MMR mid laners, I'd say you, Ryoya, and CCNC, I would say you do this the most, and Brile. I would say you do that the most. The random feeds that are not objective based. I think I'd argue CCNC is probably the best at this, since obviously not only is the highest MMR, but I think he's like a very calculated player. And I'll never tell someone like you or anyone else to like change the way you think about the game, in the sense that like if you're an instinct-based player and that's what's gotten you here, that's what you should stick to. But I do want to tell you that that is something that, like, it's been a noticeable pattern in this game, where the second you walk away from the objective at hand, you just randomly die. And a lot of the times that you've died that I don't mind is when it's like, it makes sense. Yeah, you're taking a fight here. Like, you guys push mid. You want to run into their jungle, be aggressive. They don't have ults, all that kind of stuff. It makes sense. But there's like 4 or 5 times that it just had no, like, I'm like, why? Like, what does this do? And I'll be honest, like, I think your team does this. Like, at 4Zoomers, I've watched like 5 or 10 of your games at this point, and I love the relentless aggression that you guys bring out. And whenever I see it being calculated, like, I see your guys' games go from like 0 to 100 in terms of, you guys sometimes have games where you're like owning, you're just fucking poning. And then there's some games where I'm like watching you guys walk into the opponent triangle, or like walk out of your triangle when you have a PA and you could just be sitting in the triangle, and you just feed. And I think it would help you guys a lot, and you specifically as well, to try to remind yourself about the objective at hand. Because if you forget about this for like even 3-4 seconds, it's long enough, even like a second sometimes, it's long enough to walk out of position and get yourself in a really stupid spot. But yeah. Okay. We'll watch the whole game just because it is a Gunnnar replay. Maybe not the whole game. We'll watch like one more major decision. So he's going to push out mid again. Playing on Roche now. That's clear. The heal of Artekis. Okay. Of course, we almost died for it. Going for a Shivas. I don't know how I feel about Shivas. You're against... I guess the heal reduction is maybe what you're doing for Timber. I don't see the point of Shivas here. I feel like I would either go a raw HP item, an Eon Disc, or a damage item. I feel like that's kind of the 3 options. They don't really have any physical damage. I don't exactly understand this Shivas. I can't validate it. You're also against a Nyx who does more damage to you based on your int. So you're actually just making him kill you. So you have the Shaco coming out, which is really nice. Okay. So we're playing around Roche. We have vision. We're playing on high ground. They make an aggressive play. Punish them for it. All that was good. Really good save on Oracle. Good BKB usage. Very rarely will I ever complain about Gunnar's teamfight execution. I think that's definitely his strong suit. I think that's why 4-zoomers can do such crazy things sometimes and get away with it. And I think if you guys and yourself were to hone down and I'd say hone the discipline aspect of aggression, you guys would be a force to be reckoned with. Because, like, that was really good execution in that team fight. That was really good stuff. I'd say that's a lot about where I lack as a player. What you just did correctly. Yeah, so notice how he's just playing around Roche. Notice how he is just playing around Roche. It's all about Roche. Top and mid lane are the ones that matter. If Monkey King wants to farm bottom for efficiency, that's fine, but he's going to play around Roche. And this is good. So you actually double back for a Linken's rather than Shiva's. Which makes sense. I think any item that keeps you alive is the item you need to buy. Probably for the Abyssal Blade and the Yules and the Sheep, I would imagine the Linken's. This item I can rationalize, which makes sense to me. I would love to hear your thoughts about why you'd ever consider Shiva's. Kind of just a random item. Shiva's is usually like a luxury item to me. It's like an item that you buy because it makes your game easier to play, and you just like don't need another item. And for me, I feel like you definitely needed other things. You know, I don't play a shit ton of Pugna, but I can just envision like 9 ways you could die here. And maybe buying an item to help one of those would be good. So Linken's makes sense. Can rationalize that. Good positioning. You get gone on. You get saved by the Abyssal. Nice turnaround. Oh, Earthshaker fucked up. You tipped Nyx. Very nice. I think you were trying to tip Shaker, but... You know, sometimes you just gotta walk up a hill out of position in order to tip somebody. That's fine. You know, man, I'm not even gonna harp on that. The first mistake you made in a team fight where you just completely overstepped your positioning, you were busy tipping the opponent after they messed up their Echo Slam. Not only did you tip the wrong guy, but you also fed miserably for tipping somebody. And I respect that. I respect it, good sir. And that is a nice place to end the replay analysis as, you know, this game is just going to become more and more chaotic. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that one.